Welcome to the Hourly Podcast. In today's episode, David Walsh, VP of People Services for New England Authentic Eats, shares his journey from England to the U.S. and his experiences within the restaurant industry, particularly with Papa Gino's and D'Angelo. He discusses the importance of legacy in a long-standing company, the challenges faced during COVID, and innovative communication strategies that enhance employee engagement. David emphasizes the significance of two-way communication and fostering a positive workplace culture, and shares insights on how feedback from employees can lead to meaningful changes within the organization. Enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
Good.
David, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for those that don't know you, tell us a little about you. And before we started talking, I already noticed an accent. So I feel like it doesn't start here in America, so I got to hear the whole story.
No, I grew up in England, in the northwest of England, and I was fortunate at the age of 20 to come over to the US as a summer camp counselor, and I spent a number of summers up in the northeast at a private summer camp. Left, decided to go travel around the world, then settled back in the UK and had itchy feet again, and was fortunate enough to come and move to the US permanently 15 years ago. I'm back in the summer camp industry for a little while, about 7 or 8 years, and then found my way to Papa Gino's and D'Angelo's, heading up people services.
Love it. So talk to me a little bit about Papa Gino's and D'Angelo's. Being and spending time in Northeast myself, of course, great slice of pie. But for people who are in California and Texas, tell us a little bit about the brand.
Yeah, we're a Northeast regional brand, and originally a family-owned business, Papa Gino's. We have 120 locations for both brands, Papa Gino's and D'Angelo Grill Sandwiches in the Northeast. We've been around for about 65, 70 years.
Wow. And what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of working with a company that's so new or so old, right? So you have history behind it, and let's say you were to start a company now, you can kind of start from scratch. What's your experience been like with that?
Well, I think you have a lot of that legacy rollover, right, from people that grew up with Papa Gino's pizza and D'Angelo sandwich, and they don't want things to change. But you have to innovate and you have to move forward to keep with the times and stay relevant. One of the great advantages of working for the organization is there is a lot of tenure here. I have never worked anywhere where people have been with the organization for 40 plus years. We are celebrating next Wednesday a guy on my team who heads up learning and development, field training, I should say, and product development. We're celebrating his 45th anniversary next Wednesday with the organization. So there is a lot of institutional knowledge, which has great positives. And with that also comes sometimes some challenges on adaptability to change. And I think you have people that have been with you a long time that are adaptable to change and do want to adapt. You're in for a great success story.
Yeah. And let's talk about your piece of it on the people side, and to that point, keeping up with the times, staying relevant.
Yeah.
You guys have seen, over the course of 65 to 75 years, not quite the Great Depression in terms of labor market, but you've seen a lot of ups and downs and things turn sideways. And COVID, of course, is probably the craziest one in recent history. What are some things that you do at Papa Gino's that you think are unique to your brand and keep you relevant and keep up with the times, what people are looking for?
Yeah, I think COVID would be a great place to start. So my own story is that I joined Papa Gino's in this seat August of 2020. So right as COVID was really at its height. Everybody was in lockdown. I joined a company that was now pretty much at a corporate level, fully remote. Of course, we still had restaurants open, and we had great successes during COVID because of the takeout, carry-out business.
Yeah.
But what was really difficult at the time, you talk about labour market, people not comfortable to come to work, people getting sick, and having to manage that aspect of the business and keep and introduce new people to the brands, find people in the marketplace, in the job search marketplace, that weren't necessarily excited to get into the restaurant industry because it was conceivably a high risk, high transmission industry to be in, and people were leaving the restaurant industry in droves. So how do you get people willing to want to come and work for you? And I think that comes down to anybody you talk to in this space that really values the business, is this is a people industry, right? Without people, you don't have pizzas to sell, pizzas to make, sandwiches to sell. So it's how do you differentiate yourself? Yes, you have to be competitive financially from a wages standpoint, right? You can't say, okay, well, we're just going to go by on the minimum wage and things will be okay, because we know the type of people that are coming into the restaurant industry or that are leaving are different than was here 5 or 6 years ago. So you have to be competitive financially. And I think it's really important to engage your workforce. It's very easy to communicate with 80, 90, 100 plus people in a corporate setting that sit in front of a laptop all day because they're engaged in their email. That's very easy, right? Use Teams, use email, have Zoom calls. What's really challenging is meeting and engaging with your hourly team member at the entry level, because you need to engage that workforce to have a pipeline of internal promotion opportunities and a career path.
Right.
So you got to really highlight the career path, what is the opportunity here, and engage with those team members. And that's very difficult when you have a geographically diverse population, right? You've got restaurants up in New Hampshire, up in the Lakes region, out on Cape Cod, in less populated areas that are harder to get to. People won't visit them as often in terms of internally with the organization. So we need to find a way to communicate to the team. And so we use a text message service called Our Work. And that is a two-way communication platform that we send communication out on a regular cadence for new hires, but we also send communication out via announcements, any changes that we are making to policy, procedures, anything that we want everybody to know about. And when this communication comes back in, we're able to act on it in real time. And that engagement piece, I think, really sets us apart, that it's a two-way communication. And I'll give you some hard numbers on that. And this is a piece of the puzzle, right? As you come out of COVID and things stabilize, people are less likely to move jobs as frequently. But I really feel like the engagement aspect of with team members and restaurant employees is really, really fundamental to a success and a retention plan. 2021, our turnover across all positions was about 140%, which is pretty typical in the quick service restaurant industry. When I look at numbers today, our annualized turnover is forecasted to be 88%. Wow. So that is a huge improvement. It's not just one person, and that's how we engage, yes, through the text message service, but it's also how we are giving value and agency to our area managers through the performance review process. All of these things work together to create a workforce that feels valued, feels engaged, feels listened to, and therefore retention is vastly improved.
Yeah, and a lot of things I touch on there, all really interesting stuff though. Let's talk first about the types of messages you sent out, right? And the types of correspondences that you feel like have been the most valuable. Because, of course, any company can blast out a text that's like, it's snowing in New Hampshire today, it's all closed. What are some things specifically on the text message side or messages to your team that get responses and you're able to actually create some insight from specifically?
Yes. So for the new hires, they get a message on day 1, day 7, day 14, day 21, day 28.
Oh.
And that message has nuanced changes. So the first message is, welcome to the team.
Right.
Great, glad to have you with us. Let us know how your first day went. And many people won't respond to that. Well, there's not much to say to that, really. But they know that we're there for them and that they've got this message, and it's a real feel good. Then as time goes by, those messages, the nuance changes, get more detailed. So is there anything you want to tell us about your first week? We're so pleased you're with us. Is there anything you've enjoyed this first week? Okay. And then as that time goes by, we'll then send messages out on a quarterly and a stay survey basis. So I think one of the most recent ones was, what excites you about coming to work? Okay. And so we get some people say, nothing excites me. And other people will say, I have a great team. I love working with my managers, and I feel like I'm really part of a great team. And then we might send some, they'll tell me, is there anything that you would like to see improved upon? And I don't think there's many minimum wage team members that work 15, 20 hours a week that get asked that question.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we're able to ask that question, again, they feel like they've got a voice, they're being listened to. And when they do provide the feedback and we're able to respond to that feedback, thank you so much, it is really helpful. And those are the kind of insights that allow me in my role to go and impact a policy change or a process change, or start doing something or stop doing something that we were doing. And in some cases, it highlights where we've got a leadership or a managerial challenge in that restaurant. We may see trends that are appearing, very similar verbiage being used in those responses from the team in that location. So now I've got something really concrete that I can go in and coach the area manager with, and then trickle that down to the general manager, and we can impact performance reviews and performance management much more quickly and more efficiently.
Yeah. And I love that, as I've dug into more communication tools and understanding the industry more, I've been obsessed with the types of feedback that people have been giving. And, those are a few good examples, but just a few others I've heard from the field is a pattern in a business that they give people uniforms that don't fit. And that kind of starts, I know it seems really small, and for somebody that manages 150 locations, it might not be top priority, but that's the first interaction they have with the company is you're handed a t-shirt. It doesn't feel like it's for them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, how do you want the company to start? But something that, like, if they communicate that's a quick fix.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, let's make sure we have small, medium, large, extra large in the location. And then there's big things like you mentioned that are like, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this manager. And then there's innovative stuff too. Like I love the example somebody gave me of, hey, if we add this ingredient to this sandwich, it tastes a lot better. Have you ever considered that? And then the company ended up establishing it network wide, and it became their best selling sandwich. So it's like the Flamin' Hot Cheetos story too. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix, but it was like a custodian that came up with that concept, and now it's the bestseller at Cheetos. So, is there any particular example that you'd be willing to share of something big or small that you were able to like take real action on and had a big impact in the company?
Yeah, that's the flavor, the ingredient piece is one. So we just had somebody suggest a pizza topping or recipe, and we thought that is a good idea. So we go in and put that into ideation. We put that into our test kitchen, and it's actually on the menu now as a Southwestern pizza as an LTO for the next month and a half. And this came out of a restaurant from a hourly team member that was saying, we have this sandwich on the menu, why isn't this a pizza? And so they made the pizza in the restaurant. The general manager loved it and filtered it up the line, communicated it back to us through the text message service because they knew they would get a quick response to it. And now it's in market, and we'll see how that goes for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it talked to me a little bit because you brought this up several times. Two-way communication being really important. And when I look at this landscape and just communication with hourly workers, there's a lot of tools that actually pride themselves and have it as a selling position that it's one way, right? One way, one way, one way. But at some tools, the ones that you mentioned, they do two, of course.
Yeah.
Why is, from your perspective, is two-way important, and what are some benefits you'd be able to get from that?
Yeah. So if we were just to be telling people or giving people information or on whatever cadence we choose to do it on, that's all well and good that we are showing this information, everybody is aware of it. But I really want to know what is going on in the location. What is going on with your experience? What do you need? And so the two-way communication is really invaluable because that message comes in as an email to whatever design we have,
Right.
who is receiving that message, right? So that it comes in an email. And one of the most common pieces of feedback or questions we get is, how do I check my schedule, or what is my schedule? Right. So there's two learnings there. One is there's an onboarding opportunity, right, to really focus in on how does the scheduling work, the system that we use, how do you create an account, how do you log into it is actually happening. But two, we may have done all of those things and for whatever reason they didn't retain that information. But if somebody's asking and they get a response within 5 minutes of, AJ, your schedule this week is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, 5 to 9. Straight away, we've taken away any barriers there, no call out, no uncomfortability. And again, it's just that engagement that, somebody's actually, this is not a bot. This is not going into the middle of nowhere. Somebody's actually responding to this.
Yeah.
So they're more likely in the future to ask a question, provide feedback, because they know there is action behind it. Yeah. And I think that's really important. And that comes back to the retention in the organization. We all want to have stable workforce that allows promotion, career path building, but also when you're guest facing, it creates a consistent experience for the guest, a consistent product that is being produced, and training is less cyclical, right? Now you're able to advance the training. You brought somebody in as a team member, let's move them to a shift leader, assistant manager, so on. So the training path is way more efficient and productive as opposed to going back through and turning over a team member and starting again.
Do you do skip level? So like if an employee on the ground floor makes a comment about the manager, do they always have access to it, or does it bump up a level so that you can take action? How does
communication? Yeah. So with that, we deliberately set this up so that when the communication comes in from the employee, it skips the general manager and it goes automatically to the area manager, myself, the regional vice president, and one of the HR business partners, whoever is responsible for that market.
Yep.
The reason I created it that way is if there is something negative about that general manager, we want to be able to control that communication and that process. We may be able to coach that area manager, and they can then coach that general manager. If the general manager receives that information directly, we're not sure, or we don't know how they're going to respond to it necessarily.
Right. Yeah. You don't want it to be retaliatory. You don't want to create bad blood. And honestly, like, I think, it creates more comfortability in sharing, kind of knowing that, your boss in the room next door to you isn't about to read the text message back.
Yeah.
Right. And, it's interesting is, one of the arguments that I've heard, and it's sad, but I think it's one of the truths of the industry about one-way communication, is companies sometimes don't want to hear the bad stuff. Right. And I've had prospects tell me when I'm talking about two-way communication and the importance of creating a conversation versus just like a megaphone out from the top, from the ivory tower. And I've heard from the field of, well, if they say something, we don't act on it, then we're liable. I'm like, but if they don't say anything, these hourly workers are going to be miserable, live through whatever they're going through. And ultimately, best case, silent quit. Worst case, a real problem happens. Right.
And then it becomes systemic. And then I would rather know everything that is going on and then take the time to invest. investigate. And in some cases, there may not be any action that needs to be taken based on what the content of that feedback is.
Right.
But often there is something that we will learn from it, right? And we can start to see trends as well. I think it would be very short-sighted not to ask your employees to provide feedback. I think even any performance management process that you are going through, you need feedback from the other members of the team about who is being reviewed, right? Otherwise, you have a very singular lens of which you are looking at this individual or this process or whatever the case may be. And unless you've got a much varied or if not a 360 review at this, how are you able to make the best decision possible or a critical decision, critically think about the decision and take the necessary steps? I think anybody that values the people in their organization and the fabric of the organization needs feedback from as many people as possible at as many levels as possible in the organization.
On two-way communication.
On two-way.
Because like the same short-sightedness of hey, I don't want to give people an opportunity to give feedback. Two-way is the same type of, I think, talk track and thought process that people have when they say, oh, well, the hourly worker is just going to lie. Like they're just going to like give slanderous responses and the exit interviews are all going to be negative. And it's like, there's still people. And I don't think, systemically, although they don't make a lot of money, it doesn't mean that they're going to lie and cheat and steal and talk smack. It's like, hey, if they leave or they go, there's a reason. And even though if it is skewed towards negative, that feedback should be collected and where necessary should be filtered and understanding like, hey, on their way out, they might be a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to lie. And every voice in the organization matters, whether they're making $10 an hour or $10 million an hour. Right. And, I think that's something that I'm really passionate about, of course, with the hourly initiative and hourly work that we do. And it seems like you're of the same line.
Absolutely. I think you take everything in context as well, right? When you see this information come in, sometimes you can take it on face value, but the majority of the time you're going to pick up the phone and call the general manager, call the area manager and say, tell me about this person's experience with you. And often the negative feedback, if it is very negative, there is other documented instances of behavior that we were not supportive of, right? That's typically how it goes 99% of the time. There is something else that has happened there that upset that individual and they reacted in that manner. I think there aren't many occasions when we get feedback that we see actionable items on there, whether they be changes to a process, procedure, whatever the case may be, or follow up with the general manager, that we don't go and at least get context from that restaurant's leadership team to say, tell me about this experience, tell me about that, talk to the area manager. And that's how we kind of filter out where do we need to be going forward and what changes do we need to be making.
Yeah, and so rare, and I hear myself saying this more and more, it's so rare are there dots, there's usually lines, right? Where it's not just a one instance where the person says something horrible and there's not a line of dots in that way, right? And without having the feedback and of course, documentation to support that, it's hard to filter and hard to do that. But totally get it. And we are coming up on time, David, but love today's conversation. We're gonna have to do part 2, part 3. I can already sense it. But for this podcast, we always end it with one simple question. And just note that sometimes it's wildly inspiring, sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's in between. But it's, what was your first ever hourly job? And did you leave that job gracefully? Or were you fired from it?
And my first ever hourly job was a glorified cleaner in a sports center in my hometown that I grew up in. It was called like a leisure center assistant, maybe.
Okay.
I think so. And basically, I became a professional mopper and sweeper. That was it for 8-12 hours a day. You set up some equipment, but most of the time you were just mopping up messes and spills. I left gracefully. I was able to mop and sweep. My wife would say otherwise, but I am able to mop and sweep. And I left gracefully to actually head back to the US for another time at the summer camp. So yeah, mopping floors and sweeping floors is pretty much my first hourly job.
Nice. Well, David, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and we'll have to catch up soon.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, AJ. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks.